I want to start with a question. As a matter of fact, I want to start with two questions, but I do not want you to hold your hand up or say anything out loud. Have you ever disagreed with someone to the point that it caused a rift in your relationship? Have you ever done that? So I want you to think about that. And Kim said, what's the title of your sermon? I said, well, I don't have a title. She said, I got to have a title. So I just said what? Disagreement happens. Disagreement happens. So the next question is this. Do you know how to disagree with someone and still have a relationship with them, or to be able to work with them? Do you know how to disagree with someone and still have a relationship with them? Those are very important things, and it's what we're going to talk about in the book of Philippians this morning. As a matter of fact, we are in chapter 4, and we're just starting chapter 4. And that is what comes up in Philippians. Chapter 4, beginning with verse 2. And it is in the context of the church. People are disagreeing in the church. But they're not bad people. As a matter of fact, you're going to see when we read this verse 2, Paul said, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche. I have no idea how to pronounce either one of those names. To agree with each other in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, loyal yokefellow, help these women who have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are written in the book of life. Now, these women were fellow co-workers with Paul, as was Clement and some other people. And he said their names were written in the book of life, but yet they still had a disagreement. And so we're going to talk about that and see how it affects us 2,000 years later. And how we need to deal with things like that. So the first thing I want all of us to see is the reality of disagreement. How many of you are married? Let me see your hand. Or been married. Well, then you know about disagreements. If you have been married for any length of time and you've never had a disagreement, one or the other of you is a slave, okay? One or the other is a slave. That's what old Robert Fisher used to say. You remember Robert? He'd say that. Now, here's the thing. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We don't always agree, but if we can disagree in a Christian way, we can sharpen each other. We can help each other. We can learn more than just on our own. But as I said earlier, disagreements are just a part of life. When you get 100 people together, not everybody's going to think the same way. We encounter disagreements in our family, in our workplace, and even in our church community. Years ago, we were going to build a gym at Chilhowie. Well, we weren't going to build one at first, but I wanted to build a gym. And 3 of my closest friends did not want to build one. Alan Camp, Charlie Doan, and Doug Pope. But Charlie's dead now, but he was one of my best friends, and we told each other weekly that we loved each other. And Doug and Alan are here today, and they helped figure out how we were going to build a gym and help pay for it. But we weren't on the same page to begin with. But we didn't allow that to train wreck our friendship. And both of them can be pretty candid when they talk, about their reasons. But not in a derogatory way, but just in a, hey, this is how it is. Okay? So, how do you deal with that? Is what I want to ask. It is crucial that we remember that disagreements do not have to lead to division. But sometimes it does. And the bad thing is that sometimes it does in the church setting. So we can either let it lead to division or we can allow it to sharpen us and to grow us. As followers of Christ, we're called to handle disagreements with grace and humility. But does that always happen? Let me help you with the hard ones. No, it doesn't always happen. And there is a time in the Bible that I want to draw your attention to. It's in Acts chapter 15, where two prominent people in the church had a disagreement. And I'm not talking about two women that we just hear about one time. In Acts chapter 15, I want to begin with verse 36. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the brothers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Now this is two guys who had been on a missionary journey that lasted for months together. And when Paul became a Christian, nobody wanted anything to do with him. They were afraid of him because he had been killing people, putting people in prison. Do you know who the guy was who went to Paul and welcomed him into the kingdom? Barnabas. He's the only one that would do that to begin with. No wonder his name means son of encouragement. And so these two guys were as close as you could be. Pillars in the church. Paul wrote most of the New Testament. But their disagreement ended in division. As a matter of fact, it says Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the brothers. Here's the strange thing. You don't ever hear about Barnabas anymore. And we'll see how the story ends a little bit later. But here's what I want all of us to see. It doesn't mean you're not a Christian. It doesn't mean you don't have God's things in mind when you disagree. Especially when you're talking about things in the church. Now sometimes it may be a different tale when we're arguing over politics or what we're going to eat or something, I don't think these were two men who just wanted their way, no matter what. I think both of them were in a debate over what they thought was best. But the first thing I wanted you to see is that disagreements are just a part of life. And as Christian people, we need to know how to handle them without causing division. The second thing that I want you to see is that unity is important. And Edwina used that in her communion meditation. Unity is important. In Ephesians 4:3, Paul said, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Now, he wrote that after he and Barnabas had this disagreement. So, here's what I'm saying. None of us are going to do this perfectly. I know I have not. And just because you don't do something perfectly does not mean that you can't tell others what God says about it. Because Paul did. On another occasion, when he was writing to the church at Rome, he said, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with everybody. As far as it depends on you. But there are people that just don't get it. There are people that you cannot be at peace with. And I understand that. And when you come into contact with a person like that, it is not good. Because you cannot resolve things if both people don't want them resolved. So that's why Paul prefaced that, be at peace with all men. He prefaced it with, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Now, in the church, we need to prioritize unity, not uniformity. Not everybody has to think the way I do or the way anyone else does. But we all need to have the same purpose, the same goals. And the purpose of the church is to spread the gospel to those who are not here yet. That's the purpose of the church. We do not exist for ourselves. We exist for people who are not here yet. That's our job, to tell others about Jesus and what He has done. And one parachurch organization that I get their materials and things, one of their themes is that they want to help heaven be more crowded. They want to do things that will make heaven more crowded. That ought to be what you want and what I want. Now, we can't save anybody. I cannot save anybody. That's the job of the Holy Spirit and God. But we can certainly tell people the story of Jesus. And that is the job of the church. It's not to have church on Sunday morning. It's not to have Sunday school. It's not to have small groups. It's not to feed the hungry, although we do all those things. The purpose of the church is to tell the story of Jesus. It's called the good news, which is called the gospel. That's why we exist. And so when we're making plans for the future, about what we want to do and programs we want to have and ministries we want to have, what we got to do is ask, does this help us fulfill our purpose? Is what we're about to do help us fulfill our purpose? And if it does, we need to do it. If it doesn't, we don't need to do it. Whether I like it, you like it, whoever likes it. You know, the only great ideas are the ones that I have. Or if it's you, it's the ones that you have. If we think of it, we all think it's a wonderful idea. But if it doesn't fulfill the purpose of the church, then we don't need to be doing it. Now, so I said all of that so I could say we need to be unified around the purpose. Not what I like, not what you like or somebody else likes. We need to be unified around the purpose of the church. And unity was a big deal for Jesus. And in John, most of us call the Lord's Prayer the one in the Sermon on the Mount. You know, our Father who art in heaven, all that. I call that the model prayer. The Lord's Prayer is in John 17. When he prayed for himself, and then he prayed for his disciples, and then lastly he prayed for all of us. And I want to read to you a portion of what he prayed about in John 17:20, beginning with verse 20. He said, "My prayer is not for them alone," talking about the apostles, the disciples that saw him. "My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message." That's you, that's me, and that's everybody from their time to our time, and that will be till the end of time. So Jesus is praying specifically for us. Verse 21, that all of them may be what? One. That all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us. Why? So that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I and them, and you and me. May they be brought to complete unity to let the world know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. So do you want to know how the world, the non-Christian people, are going to know that God sent Jesus? It's if you and I have unity around God's purpose. It's not about how much money I give. It's not about how many times I attend church. It's not about how many times I pray. The outside world is looking at us. And Jesus knew that. And he prayed that all of us, not just the 12, but all of us who would come later, would be unified around his purpose. And so I hope that all of us want to do that, no matter what it looks like. None of us get our way all the time. It's just life. And the same is true in the church. It's not about what I want or I like. It's about what will best fulfill the purpose that God gave the church. If you will look around, a lot of us in here are not getting any younger. And if we don't fulfill the purpose of the church, how many people are going to be here 10 years from now? And what's the age of our congregation going to be then? It's not about it's not about the type of music I like or you like. It's not about any of those things. It's about fulfilling the purpose of getting the message about Jesus to those who are not here yet. And I've stressed that for years in my ministry. And that is the purpose of the church. Whatever it happens to look like. When we work together, despite our disagreements, we demonstrate the love and the power of Christ to a watching world. And I can tell you right now, the Church Universal does not have a very good name out in society because of all the division in the church. So our purpose is to take the story of Jesus to as many people as possible while we can. And then the last thing I want you to see is the power of reconciliation. You know, a lot of times we do let our agreements cause division to the way Paul and Barnabas did. And so when we do that, we need to ask God to help us not be that way and seek reconciliation. Jesus said this in Matthew 5:23 and 24. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, or if you're coming to church and beginning to take communion, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, put your communion cup down or leave your gift in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Now, let me be quick to say, it may be a situation where that person does not want reconciliation. Remember I said, well, how did Paul preface it? As much as it depends on you. Some people that you and I disagree with, they're not concerned about what's best in the kingdom. They're concerned about what? What they want. And there's nothing you can do about that. But reconciliation is at the heart of our Christian faith. So, I want us to, the main thing, how many of you have heard an ounce of prevention is worth what? A pound of cure. So let's try not to get there, but occasionally we do. I mean, the guy who wrote most of the New Testament had a division with Barnabas, one of the most humble people in the New Testament. But I think Paul had a temper. How many of y'all think Paul had a temper? Yeah. He was like Mary Lynn, you know. But I want to read you something from 2 Timothy chapter 4. And I'm going to begin with verse 9. 2 Timothy 4, verse 9. Paul is writing to Timothy. Here's what he says. Do your best to come to me quickly, for Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Now listen to this. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. That's John Mark. that he and Barnabas had this disagreement over. And not just a disagreement, but division. I wonder how Paul and John Mark reconciled. I don't know. Maybe they ran into each other somewhere. Maybe Paul thought about it and God put it on his heart to forgive John for deserting them. But somehow, they're back in more than just a casual relationship. Because Paul said, Timothy, get Mark and bring him with you. For he is helpful to me in my ministry. I don't know, there's nothing in the Bible about it, but probably Paul and Barnabas forgave each other. But here's the attitude that I want us to have. Even though we disagree, we still need to love each other. Now, in the heat of a disagreement, how many of us feel like we're loving on the other person? Not me. I don't. Now, let me be quick to say, this is in the context of the church, what I'm talking about. If you're dealing with a non-Christian, they're not going by these rules. Right? They're not living by these rules. So it's hard to deal with that. But all of us need to, first of all, strive for unity. When disagreements come, pray that it will not cause division. But if it does come, and it is possible, we need to seek reconciliation. The way Paul did. And so, disagreements will happen. But they do not have to define us. They don't have to define us. And I hope that they do not. But here's what I do want all of us to see. And that is when Paul was writing about this, he said in verse 3, yes, and I ask you, loyal yokefellow, help these women who have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel. Help these women who have contended at my side in what? In the purpose of the church. To spread the gospel. And in Philippians chapter 1, verse 27, if you use the ESV, it also says that we contend for the gospel side by side. Paul, as great as he was, could not carry out the ministry God had planned for him by himself. He needed other people by his side. And all of us need people by our side to help us carry on the job and the purpose of the church. And so I'm asking all of you to contend side by side with one another and with me to carry out the purpose of the church in this community. A lot of people they want to They want to do things the easy way, and they want to sort of coast. I don't want to coast. Some preachers, they'll say, well, God doesn't call us to be successful. He calls us to be faithful. And it sounds real religious, you know. God just calls us to be faithful. But in Foundations with Frank, we've been going through 1st and 2nd Peter. And Peter said that you and I are not supposed to be ineffective and unproductive. So in other words, you and I are supposed to be effective and productive as an individual and as a congregation. And that's what I want us to be. Contending together, side by side.